The night was cold, and the wind cut through the empty streets of the colony like a knife. The human farmers were asleep in their small houses, and only the sound of rustling leaves and distant machines filled the air. Far away, a pair of glowing eyes watched the quiet buildings, eyes filled with hunger and fear. She was not human, though at first glance she looked almost like one. Her skin was pale with a faint shimmer that caught the light, and her long dark hair was tangled and dirty. Her clothes were torn, no more than scraps, and her hands shook from weakness. For days she had gone without food, and now her stomach twisted with pain. She had tried to beg from travelers before, but most turned away from her, some even threw stones. To them she was nothing more than a thief, an outcast alien, someone not worth saving. Tonight she told herself she had no choice. If she did not eat, she would die. Her eyes fixed on a wooden crate near the back of a farmhouse. The crate was filled with bread loaves brought in from the human fields. She knew stealing was wrong, but her body screamed louder than her thoughts. She crept closer, her bare feet silent on the dirt, her breath shallow. Each step was heavy with fear. She looked left and right, expecting someone to shout, but the farm seemed asleep. With trembling hands, she lifted the lid of the crate and pulled out one loaf. The smell hit her like fire, fresh, warm, almost holy to her starving senses. Her mouth watered as she tore a piece and shoved it between her lips. For the first time in days, she tasted food, and tears rolled down her cheeks. But she was not alone. A deep voice broke the silence, sharp as thunder. "What are you doing there?" Her whole body froze. The bread fell from her hand, landing in the dust. Slowly, she turned, her heart pounding like a drum in her chest. A man stood in the shadows, tall, broad-shouldered, a lantern glowing in his hand. His face was rough from years of work, his eyes dark with suspicion. He was human, and he was staring at her like one stares at a wild animal. Her legs shook, and she dropped to her knees at once, her hands raised. "Please," she whispered, her voice breaking. "I was hungry. I was desperate. I did not mean harm." The man stepped closer, his boots crunching the dirt. He looked down at her, the lantern light falling across her face. He could see the sharp bones under her skin, the fear in her trembling lips. She was no warrior, no raider, just a starving girl who had risked everything for a piece of bread. For a long moment, silence hung between them. The girl expected a blow, a shout, chains around her wrists. Instead, the man's brow furrowed, and he asked in a low voice, "You're not from here, are you?" She shook her head, shame burning her cheeks. "I came from the east, from the broken lands. I have nothing." Her words were simple, but her tone carried the weight of truth. The man's grip on the lantern tightened. He should have dragged her to the colony guards. Thieves were punished, and aliens were never forgiven. Yet something in her eyes stopped him. It was not greed he saw, but despair. Still on her knees, the girl bowed her head until her forehead touched the dirt. "Do not turn me in, I beg you. I will do anything. I will work for you. I will give my hands in the fields by day. Only spare me." The man's jaw tightened, his mind at war. He had lived alone for years, tending his fields in silence. Humans did not trust outsiders, and taking in an alien would be foolish, dangerous even. But her words echoed in his chest. "I will work for you." He looked at the fallen loaf, half torn in the dirt. Then he looked at her again, small, thin, but burning with determination even in her weakness. Slowly, he reached down, picked up the bread, brushed off the dust, and held it out to her. Her eyes widened, disbelief mixing with fear. She did not dare take it at first, thinking it was a trick. But when his hand stayed firm, she reached out with shaking fingers and clutched it. She held the bread to her chest as if it were gold, her tears falling freely. "Eat," he said simply, his voice calm but stern. "Tomorrow we will see if your hands can truly work the fields." The girl nodded quickly, pressing the bread to her lips. She ate slowly, savoring every bite, her body trembling with relief. For the first time in months, warmth filled her stomach. And for the first time in years, the farmer felt the weight of loneliness shift. Neither of them knew what tomorrow would bring. But in that moment, under the lantern's glow, a bargain had been made. A hungry thief and a lonely farmer, bound by chance, by desperation, and by something neither could name yet. The first light of dawn spread across the fields. painting the soil gold under the rising sun. The farmer stood by the fence, his hands on the wooden post, watching as the alien girl bent down to lift a basket. She was weak, her arms thin, but there was no hesitation in her movements. Every time she stumbled, she pushed herself to stand again, her jaw clenched with determination. He had expected her to run during the night, to vanish into the wilderness with the bread he had given her. But she was still here, standing barefoot in the dirt, ready to work. Something about her choice unsettled him. It was not what thieves did. Thieves took and fled, but she stayed, offering her hands instead of tricks. She looked up at him, sweat already shining on her forehead though the day had barely begun. "You gave me food," she said softly, her voice trembling but steady enough to carry. "I will not betray that kindness. I will work until my bones break. Only let me stay." The farmer did not answer at once. Instead, he watched as she pulled weeds from the soil with her bare hands, dirt sinking into the cuts on her skin. He could see she had never worked a field before, her movements clumsy, her grip awkward. But he could also see her will, stronger than the hunger that still lingered in her body. Finally, he spoke, his tone rough. "You know nothing of farming. You will slow me down. The guards will ask questions if they see you here." The girl froze, her hands tightening around the roots she had just pulled. She turned, her eyes shining with fear, but also with a strange spark of hope. "I will learn," she whispered. "I will learn whatever you teach me. I will rise before the sun. I will work after it falls. I ask only for scraps, nothing more." The farmer's chest tightened as he looked at her. It had been years since anyone had spoken to him with such desperation. He had lived alone too long, his farm a place of silence, his nights empty of voices. And here was this frail stranger, ready to destroy her body for the chance to belong somewhere. He took a deep breath and stepped closer. "Fine," he said, his eyes narrowing. "But if you stay, you obey my rules. You work hard. No questions, no wandering near the others. Do you understand?" The girl nodded at once, her head bowed. "Yes," she whispered. "I will follow your rules. I will never bring you trouble." And so her days began. She rose with the dawn and carried baskets heavier than her body should have allowed. She stumbled often, but never once asked for rest. She learned to cut weeds with a sharp tool, to water the dry soil, to stack the crates of grain. Her palms blistered and bled, but she wrapped them with cloth torn from her old clothes and continued. At night, she sat on the steps of the farmhouse, her body shaking from exhaustion. The farmer brought her a small bowl of stew, never more than his own share, sometimes less. She ate slowly, savoring every bite as if it were the last meal she would ever have. Then she looked at him, her eyes soft in the glow of the firelight, and she whispered words he did not expect. "Thank you for letting me live another day." He wanted to brush it off, to tell her she was only here because he had no patience for crying thieves. But the truth was harder to ignore. Every night, when she whispered those words, his chest felt warmer, his loneliness less sharp. Her presence was like a faint flame in a cold house, small but steady, refusing to die. Still, he did not trust her completely. There was mystery in her eyes, a shadow she had not yet revealed. He wondered why she had come alone, why her kind had left her, what danger followed behind her. But each time he thought to ask, he stopped himself. He feared that if he pressed too hard, she would vanish, and with her would go the strange comfort she brought to his quiet life. One evening, as the moon rose high, she came to him with trembling hands. She held out a bundle of cloth. Inside it were wildflowers she had gathered near the stream. "They are useless for food," she admitted shyly. "But they are pretty. They remind me of my home. I thought maybe they could remind you too, of something better than silence." The farmer stared at the flowers, his rough hands hovering above them. For years his table had been bare, his walls empty, his life colorless. And now, because of this alien girl, his home felt different, less hollow, more alive. He took the flowers and set them in a cup on the table. When he looked back at her, she was smiling faintly, though her eyes still carried sadness. That night, as he lay in his bed, he realized something dangerous. The thief had not only offered her hands for the day, she had already started to offer her heart by night. And though he tried to deny it, he knew deep down that his own heart was beginning to answer. The days turned into weeks, and the alien girl worked beside the human farmer as if the soil itself had claimed her hands. At first, she struggled with every task, but slowly she grew stronger, her arms carrying baskets without trembling, her back straightening under the weight of the work. Her eyes no longer carried only fear. They carried something brighter, a fire that refused to die. The farmer watched her from a distance each day, pretending his eyes were on the fields, yet always noticing her movements. She sang sometimes in a soft language he did not understand, strange notes rising with the wind. The songs were both beautiful and sad, like a memory of something lost, and though he did not know the words, he felt them in his chest. At night, when the work was done, she did not disappear into the shadows as he expected. Instead, she lingered, sitting by the wooden steps, her eyes lifting to the stars. Sometimes she asked questions, her voice quiet. Do humans always build homes so far apart? Why do you trust the earth more than machines? Her curiosity was endless, and though he tried to answer with short words, her questions pulled longer stories from his lips. For years, he had lived in silence, speaking only to traders who came for grain. Now he found himself speaking until the fire burned low, his own voice surprising him. And she listened, always listened, as if every word he gave her was a treasure. One evening, as the air grew cool, she placed her hand over her chest and whispered, "Where I come from, when someone saves your life, you give them a bond, you give them your trust, sometimes more than trust." Her eyes met his, glowing faintly in the firelight, and for a moment he forgot to breathe. He turned away quickly, telling himself it was nothing, yet her words stayed with him long after the night fell quiet. But not everything was peace. There were whispers in the colony, whispers of missing food, of shadows seen near the farms. Strangers came through the fields asking questions, their eyes sharp, their boots heavy with authority. The farmer answered with gruff words, keeping them away from his land, but he knew the danger was growing. If they found her, if they saw her face, she would be dragged away, and perhaps he too would be punished for hiding her. The girl sensed his worry, though he never spoke it. One night, she approached him, holding out a small piece of metal tied to a string. "This is all I have left of my people," she said, her voice trembling. "If you fear I will bring ruin, I will leave now. I will not let you fall for me only to lose everything." Her words pierced him deeper than he expected. He stared at the piece of metal. It was nothing but scrap, yet she held it as if it were her heart itself. And in her eyes he saw a storm, fear that he would push her away, fear that she had already given too much. Slowly, he closed her fingers back around the trinket and said, "Stay. I will not turn you out. Not now. Not while you have nowhere to go." She gasped softly, her lips parting as if she would speak more, but instead she only nodded, her shoulders shaking with silent relief. For a moment, under the pale moonlight, the distance between human and alien seemed to vanish. They were not farmer and thief, not human and outcast, but two souls clinging to the same fragile hope. From that night forward, their bond deepened. She worked not only with her hands, but with her heart, bringing small changes to the farm, arranging tools neatly, fixing broken baskets with care, even planting flowers at the edge of the fields. The farmer found himself waiting for her smile each evening, the quiet sound of her voice like medicine to his tired spirit. Yet deep in the shadows, danger still waited. The colony's guards had begun searching more closely, speaking of punishment for those who had outsiders. The farmer knew that one wrong step, one curious neighbor, and everything he was beginning to feel could be ripped away in an instant. And so, as the girl hummed her soft songs under the stars, he sat nearby, his heart torn between fear and longing. He told himself he was only protecting her out of duty, out of fairness. But each time her eyes met his, he felt the truth burning inside him. The truth that he was no longer protecting her out of duty at all. He was protecting her because she had already stolen something more precious than bread. She had stolen his heart, and unlike bread, he was not sure he wanted it back. The farm had become a place of routine, the days filled with work and the nights filled with quiet talk. But beneath the calm, the farmer knew a storm was waiting. The colony guards had visited again, their voices sharp, their eyes searching every corner. They spoke of thieves, of enemies, of outsiders who must be turned in at once. Each time they left, His chest felt heavier, for he knew they were not wrong. The girl he had taken in was hiding something. That night, the air was thick, clouds covering the stars. The fire burned low as the girl sat near the doorway. She had been silent all evening, her fingers twisting the small piece of metal she carried like a charm. The farmer finally spoke, his tone rough, not out of anger, but out of fear. "You never told me the truth. Who are you running from? What danger follows you here?" She froze, her breath caught in her throat, her eyes wide as if he had touched a wound she had tried to hide. For a long time she did not answer, and he thought she would remain silent forever. But then her lips parted, and her voice came out broken, trembling. "I was not always alone. I was not always a thief. I belonged to a people who lived in the valleys far from here. We had homes, families, songs." Her eyes glistened with tears, shining in the dim firelight. "Then they came, warlords with ships and fire. They took our land. They burned our homes. They chained my people. They sold us to traders like cattle." Her hands shook as she clutched the metal charm to her chest. "This piece, it is all I kept. It was part of my mother's bracelet. She did not survive." The farmer felt his throat tighten. She was no thief by choice. She was a survivor of a war he had only heard whispers about. A war where whole villages were erased, where no one was spared. She looked at him then, her voice rising, desperate. "I escaped one night when they marched us through the broken lands. I ran, I hid, I stole to live, and when I reached this colony, I thought maybe I could find mercy." Her words cracked, her body trembling as if the memories still burned her skin. "I know what I am to humans, a burden, a curse. But if you give me away, they will take me back, they will sell me again, and this time I will not escape." The farmer sat in silence, the weight of her truth pressing down on him like stone. He had seen her as a thief, then as a worker, then as something more. But now he saw her as she truly was, a refugee of cruelty, carrying scars deeper than hunger. Her voice broke again, softer now. "I told you I would give you my hands by day, my heart by night. But I cannot give you lies. This is who I am, a hunted soul. If you wish me gone, say the word. I will walk into the dark tonight." The lantern flickered, shadows moving across his face. He looked at her, trembling in the doorway, her eyes wet with fear, her thin shoulders bent under invisible chains. He should have been afraid of the guards, afraid of the warlords who might one day come searching. But instead, all he felt was anger, not at her, but at those who had crushed her life and forced her into this silence. Finally, he spoke, his voice firm. "You will not walk into the dark, not while I still breathe. This farm is no palace, but it will shelter you, and if they come, they will have to pass through me first." Her mouth parted in shock, tears spilling freely now. "No one has ever said such words to me," she whispered. For a moment, she looked as if she would collapse from the weight of his promise. Instead, she dropped to her knees, her hands clutching his rough ones. "I will not forget this. I swear by the blood of my people. You have my bond, not only my hands, not only my heart, but all I am." The fire crackled between them, and though the night outside was dark, within the small farmhouse there was light. Yet even as their bond grew stronger, the danger outside pressed closer. The guards were still searching, the warlords still ruled the broken lands. And the farmer knew that by keeping her, he had crossed a line that could never be undone. But he did not regret it. For in her eyes, he no longer saw just an outcast or a thief. He saw hope, fragile but alive. And he vowed silently that he would fight to keep it burning, no matter the cost. The farm no longer felt as quiet as before. Every creak of the fence, every shadow on the horizon, carried with it a warning. The farmer worked with his head lowered, but his eyes often scanned the distance. The girl noticed his unease, and though she said nothing, her own hands trembled when strangers passed on the road. One morning, heavy boots crushed the soil outside the farmhouse. 3 men from the colony guards stood at the gate, their armor dull but their eyes sharp. They carried spears and lanterns, and the farmer knew at once they were not here for trade. The tallest of them, with a scar across his cheek, stepped forward. "We have reports," he said coldly. "Food has gone missing. Animals have been frightened in the night. Some say an outsider has been seen near these fields." The farmer's jaw tightened, his heart pounding in his chest. His mind raced. knowing the girl was inside the farmhouse, hiding in the shadows just as they had agreed. He forced his voice to stay steady. You know me. I've lived here for years. I guard my fields. I need no thief near my land. The scarred guard narrowed his eyes. We will search. If you are clean, you have nothing to fear. The farmer's blood turned to fire, but he held his ground. No, he said firmly. This is my home. No one enters without my word. The standoff was heavy, silence stretched, the other guards shifting uncomfortably. Finally, the scarred man spat on the ground and stepped back. Fine, but if we hear of shadows near your farm again, we will return, and then we will not ask. The guards turned, their boots thudding against the earth as they left, but their eyes lingered, sharp and suspicious. Only when they disappeared into the distance did the farmer release the breath he had been holding. Inside, the girl was crouched behind a crate, her body shaking like a leaf. When he entered, she looked up at him, her eyes wide with terror. They know, she whispered. They will come again, they will take me, and they will punish you for hiding me. The farmer sat heavily on the wooden chair, his hands rubbing his face. They suspect, he admitted, but they found nothing. As long as you stay hidden, they cannot prove what they fear. She moved closer, kneeling beside him, her voice breaking. Why do you risk this? Why not send me away? You owe me nothing, yet you face danger for me every day. He looked down at her, her eyes shimmering with tears, and for a moment he did not answer. The truth was dangerous to speak, even to himself. But as she gripped his hand, her warmth trembling against his calloused skin, he whispered, because somewhere along the way, I stopped seeing you as a burden. Her breath caught, and her lips parted as if she would speak, but then she closed them again, overwhelmed. Instead, she lowered her head, pressing her forehead to the back of his hand, a gesture of loyalty older than words. The following days were heavy with tension. The guards patrolled more often, and neighbors from the colony stopped by with suspicious eyes, pretending to ask about crops, but letting their gazes linger too long on the farmhouse. The girl stayed hidden during the day, working only at night when the fields were dark and silent. She moved like a ghost, her steps careful, her presence almost invisible. But the farmer saw the toll it took, her spirit weighed down by fear, her songs fading into silence. One night, unable to bear it, he found her sitting by the stream at the edge of his land, the moonlight painting silver on her hair. She held the metal trinket again, the last piece of her mother. I dream of them, she whispered, of the fire, the chains, the screams, and every morning I wake afraid it will all happen again. The farmer sat beside her, his voice low. You are safe here, he said, though even as he spoke, he wondered if it was a lie. They will not take you, not while I live. Her hand brushed against his, light as a feather. You speak as if your life is mine now, she whispered. And though he did not answer, he did not pull away. But danger was closer than either of them realized. At the edge of the colony, whispers spread like smoke. Some claimed the farmer was hiding something. Others swore they saw shadows moving in his fields at night. And among the guards, the scarred man was not satisfied. He would return, not with questions this time, but with proof and punishment. Back at the farmhouse, the girl leaned against the doorway, her eyes on the dark horizon. Her heart beat with fear, yet also with a strange warmth she had never known. The farmer had stood against the guards for her. He had lied to protect her. He had promised to shield her even at the cost of his life. And she knew then that her hands and her heart were no longer just an offer. They were already his, bound by a bond that neither war nor suspicion could break. Still, the night carried a chill. The threat had arrived, and it would not fade. It would grow, and soon, both of them would have to face it. The days grew heavier, each one carrying the weight of unspoken fear. The guards had not returned yet, but the farmer knew it was only a matter of time. He could see it in the way his neighbors glanced at him, in the way whispers followed him at the market. Every look seemed to ask the same question. What was he hiding? Inside the farmhouse, the girl moved quietly, as if her very breath might bring danger. She worked in silence, her hands steady but her eyes always drifting to the window. Every sound outside made her flinch. Every knock of the wind made her heart race. The fire that once shone in her eyes had dimmed under the weight of waiting. One evening, after the fields were dark, The farmer found her sitting on the step. Her trinket lay in her hands, the metal catching the faint glow of the lantern. She was whispering words in her own language, words that sounded like prayer. When she noticed him, she lowered her head, ashamed. "I ask for strength," she murmured, "because I fear I bring you only weakness." The farmer stood beside her, his arms crossed, his voice low. "You are not weakness," he said firmly. "You are the reason I fight against fear. You give me more strength than I ever had alone." She looked up, her eyes wide, shimmering with a mixture of hope and disbelief. "You cannot mean that. I am hunted. I am trouble. The whole colony will turn on you because of me." He crouched down, his rough hand lifting her chin gently, forcing her eyes to meet his. "I lived in silence for too many years. My house was empty. My life was empty. Then you came. Yes, you brought danger, but you also brought life back into this place, back into me." Her lips trembled, her breath unsteady. "No one has ever said such words to me," she whispered. "Not even among my own people. They never saw me. Not like this." His hand lingered near hers, rough fingers brushing against her delicate ones. For a moment, the world outside seemed to vanish. Only the firelight and the soft beat of two hearts remained. He wanted to deny the truth, to keep distance for safety, but he could not. It was already too late. His heart had made its choice long ago. "You will not leave," he said, his voice carrying the weight of a vow. "I do not care what the colony says. I do not care what danger comes. You are mine now, not as a prisoner, not as a worker, but as someone I cannot let go." Her breath caught, her tears falling freely. She placed the trinket into his hand, closing his fingers around it. "Then keep this," she whispered. "It is my last piece of home. If you hold it, then all I am belongs to you." The farmer stared at the small piece of metal, feeling its weight as if it were a crown. It was nothing to anyone else, but to her, it was a symbol of love, of trust, of surrender. He held it tightly, then pulled her close, wrapping his arms around her thin shoulders. She leaned against him, trembling, but not from fear this time, from relief. That night, for the first time, she did not sit apart from him. She sat at his table, ate from the same bowl, her laughter faint but real as he told her an old story from his youth. The walls of the farmhouse seemed less empty, the silence replaced with warmth. By the time the fire burned low, they sat close together, his hand resting over hers on the table. Yet outside, the world did not rest. The guards had not forgotten their suspicion, and the scarred man still whispered of shadows in the fields. Neighbors still talked, and rumors grew. The farmer knew the storm would break soon, and when it did, it would test everything. But as he looked at the girl beside him, her eyes shining with quiet trust, he knew his choice was made. He would not let fear decide his life anymore. He had chosen heart, and no threat, no guard, no warlord would take that from him. For the first time in many years, the farmer lay down to sleep with peace in his chest. Not because the danger was gone, but because he no longer faced it alone. The storm came at last, not of rain or thunder, but of men. Before the sun had fully risen, the sound of boots shook the soil of the farm. The scarred guard returned with 5 others, their weapons glinting in the pale light. They did not call out this time. They marched with purpose, their eyes set on the farmhouse. The farmer was already waiting at the door, his lantern in one hand, a wooden staff in the other. His heart pounded, but his stance was firm. The girl stood behind him, her breath shallow, her hands clutching the edge of his shirt. She whispered, "They will kill you if you resist," but he did not move. The scarred man sneered, his voice sharp. "We warned you, and you spat in our faces. Now we take what you hide." He motioned toward the guards, and they stepped forward, ready to push past. But the farmer slammed his staff against the ground, the sound echoing like thunder. "No one enters," he said, his voice like stone. "This is my land, my home, and she is under my protection." The guards froze, surprised at his defiance. The scarred man laughed harshly. "You risk your life for a thief, for an alien, for something less than human." The farmer's eyes burned. "She is more human than any of you. She works, she suffers, she hopes, she deserves to live, and I will not let you take her." For a heartbeat, silence hung heavy. The guards shifted, unsure, their spears trembling slightly. The scarred man snarled, raising his hand, but before he could give the order, the girl stepped forward. Her voice shook, but her words carried power. Do not punish him. Punish me. I stole because I was hungry. I live because he showed me kindness. If you must take someone, take me. Leave him. The farmer turned sharply, his chest tight. No, he growled. I will not let them touch you. Not while I draw breath. The scarred man smirked, ready to seize her, but something shifted then. Neighbors had gathered at the edge of the field, drawn by the noise. They watched, whispering among themselves, their eyes on the girl, thin and trembling, yet standing tall beside the farmer. They saw her courage, her willingness to sacrifice herself, and doubt flickered in their hearts. One of the younger guards lowered his spear, muttering, "She looks no raider, no killer, only a girl trying to live." Another shook his head, his voice uneasy. "Are we men, or are we hunters of the weak?" The scarred man cursed, but the tide was shifting against him. The farmer stepped closer, his voice rising for all to hear. "You call her thief, yet she has given more to this land than many of you. She works with her hands until they bleed. She shares her heart though she has nothing left. And I tell you this, if kindness is a crime, then I am guilty too." The words spread like fire, the crowd murmuring. The guards hesitated, their certainty breaking. Finally, with a snarl, the scarred man spat on the ground. "Keep your wretch, but do not think this is over," he hissed, and he stormed away, the others following with uncertain steps. Silence fell as the crowd slowly drifted back to their homes, some with shame in their eyes, some with quiet respect. The farmer turned, his chest heavy with relief, his staff slipping from his hand. The girl caught him, her arms around him, her tears soaking into his shirt. "You would have given your life?" she whispered, her voice breaking. "And I would do it again," he answered, holding her close. That night, there was no fear between them, only truth. She sat at his table, not as a thief, not as a stranger, but as his equal. Her laughter returned, soft and uncertain, but real. And when he reached across the table to take her hand, she did not pull away. Together, they faced the fields the next morning, the sun rising warm over the soil. She bent to work, and he worked beside her, not master and servant, but partners. By day, her hands turned the soil with his, planting seeds not only in the ground but in their shared future. By night, her heart rested against his, no longer afraid, no longer alone. The world beyond the farm was still dangerous, the warlords still ruled, the guards still watched. But they had found something greater than fear. They had found a bond, forged not in chains but in choice. And as the dawn stretched over the land, they stood together, hungry no more, desperate no more. For the human had given her a home, and she had given him her heart. And that, in the end, was enough to change everything.